Released in the US on November 30th, 1999, Japan on December 16th of the same year, and finally on September 29th, 2000 in PAL territories, we have Koudelka for the PlayStation. Developed by Saknoff, published by SNK, and distributed by Infogrames, Koudelka is an interesting mix of survival horror with grid-based tactical RPG elements. The game also serves as a prequel to the more well-known Shadowheart series, as locations and characters have made an appearance in the sequel. Set in 1898 in Wales, the location featured in the game is the mysterious Nemerton Monastery, and the story focuses on three characters drawn to the place for their own reasons. Koudelka Asant, the main character, was called by a mysterious voice. Edward Plunkett heard a rumour about a rich man refurbishing a monastery, as well as inviting a lot of women there, and fueled by his love for adventure decided to check the place out. And Father James O'Flaherty, a holy man sent on a mission by the Vatican to recover a valuable item. Our heroine and heroes meet up with one another early in the game, and as they explore the monastery, its dark history intertwines with their goals. The game does have a number of historical influences, with Edward Plunkett being very loosely based off the 18th Baron of Dunsany, who funny enough wrote a story named The Fortress Unvanquishable, save for Saknoff, which not only served as the basis for the developer's name, but the sword Saknoff, which is one of the most powerful weapons in the game, is also based off the sword of the same name in the story. Charlotte, a fictional character, is a child born from the real affair between Sophia, the Princess of Hanover and wife of the future George I of England, and Philip Christoph von Königsmark. Basically, to cut a long story short, George found out, got pissed, divorced her and imprisoned her for the remaining 33 years of her life. But, history lesson aside, is the game any good? Does it live up to the tagline on the back of the case saying that it's the sexiest gothic horror RPG on PlayStation? Find out in The Good. I think the game did very well in its visual presentation. The character models for a PlayStation game looks great, and the pre-rendered backgrounds certainly help the horror aspects of the game. Some of the places around Nemerton Monastery certainly look unsettling, and I found that builds the atmosphere very well. The game's FMVs, or full motion videos, are visually appealing and very detailed, making them a treat to watch. Now, while some of the enemies I encountered in the game look a little abstract at times, I have to admire the artistic design and creativity of it, especially with the bosses. The game holds a number of hidden secrets, and while the game doesn't hold your hand in revealing them, the satisfaction of finding them is more than enough to make up for it. Sometimes that one seemingly useless item that you pick up may grant you a new weapon or hold a purpose elsewhere in the game. One of them, as a matter of fact, will prevent you from getting a bad ending providing that you're wearing it when the time comes. The game also has some pretty abstract secrets as well, one of them requiring you to save at a certain time with a certain number of items to gain a special item. If you were diligent, one of those items will help greatly against an optional boss, while another will make the game a walk in the park. Character development I also thought was handled quite well. Despite all three of the characters working together, it's clear that they have different views and disagree quite frequently, but over the course of the game they become quite tolerant of one another. Not long after Koudelka and Edward meet, the former criticises the latter over how naive and trusting he was when he unknowingly drank poisoned soup offered to him from what appeared to be a caring old couple.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, if it weren't poisoned, then I would have had some.
Pardon?
I said, if the soup weren't poisoned, then I would have had some. Got it?
Poisoned.
James, on the other hand, when he joins the party, flat out refuses to believe that the couple were capable of doing something like that, and for a large portion of the game appears cold and stubborn, especially when the topic turned to faith.
That husband and wife team? And the food? Was there no poison in your food?
What are you talking about? Are you out of your mind?
Those caretakers tried to poison and kill us.
That's not funny. I find it inappropriate for you to try to dupe an upstanding believer of the Christian faith.
While both Koudelka and Edward aren't particularly too fond of James, they eventually grow tolerant of him as the game continues, and they learn a little more about him, with Edward and James finding each other appreciative of Shakespeare and quoting his passages.
I am not bound to please thee with my answers.
Do all men kill the things they do not love?
Hate any man, the thing he would not kill?
And I thought all outlaws read just simple, stupid poets. You read Shakespeare. You're smarter than you look.
That makes two of us.
James in turn, once he opens up a little more, learns to respect the other two. The relationship between the three improves to a point where James and Koudelka offer to continue on and suggest the others, or in Koudelka's case Edward, can leave if they want. Another interesting thing to note are the status builds of your three characters. While Koudelka is magic orientated and Edward is strength orientated, James is the most flexible, allowing you to either have another strong magic user like Koudelka or a strong fighter like Edward, which is reflected in his character being knowledgeable in many different fields, as opposed to Edward's desire for exploration making him physically strong, and Koudelka's connection with the spirits making her mentally strong. However, what we have next isn't so strong, so with that, let's move on to the bad. Inventory management in Koudelka was an absolute nightmare. The items you pick up over the course of the game are separated into 4 categories: weapon, armor, accessory and tool. While I'm thankful the game does sort items into those categories, you can only carry a certain amount of items at all times. To make matters worse, any key items you pick up go into the tool section and also contribute towards that limit, forcing you to pick and choose which items you should or shouldn't throw away. This also becomes difficult if you're trying to get some of the secret gear, as you need to have a certain amount of items on hand, as well as saving at very specific times. Equipped weapons and accessories appear on the list without any indication that you've got them equipped when you are forced to discard items, sometimes making it trial and error before you can find a weapon or accessory that isn't equipped to anyone to get rid of. The combat system for the most part was very monotonous and could use a little more work. With the exception of a couple of the bosses, the remainder of the boss fights felt like I was just fighting stronger monsters. The weapon and magic experience system was something I wasn't greatly keen on either. Through repeated use of weapons and magic, they'll grow stronger, and while I can understand the magic, weapons are significantly more frustrating as over time they break, making the learning process more tedious and annoying. When weapons are upgraded, there is the chance that when you attack you can get an extra hit in. While doing more damage is beneficial, your weapon can potentially wear out faster, or in the case of certain firearms, you're forced to reload them more often and take up a turn. With magic at higher levels, they can affect additional enemies providing they are in front, behind, or beside the target enemy. Of course, with upgraded magic, the spell will permanently cost more MP to cast. The grid-based tactical RPG side does sound nice, but you're only permitted to move up to the line where the enemy is, so you're unable to get behind to attack them. This can be trouble for you, since if an enemy defeats one of your party members and move forwards, you will be unable to revive them unless you can push the enemy back behind the person you want to revive, which can in itself be a challenge. With that, I've covered what I've needed to cover in the bad, so all that's left is the opinion. Before I go to the rating, I figured I should talk about the game's music, since my thoughts on that was more mixed than either good or bad. The game's score was composed by Hiroki Kikuta, who at the time was also in charge of Saknoth. Kikuta was also very well known for composing the soundtrack for Secret of Mana, which you can have a short listen to here. In comparison, the score in Koudelka does have some segments I wasn't so fond of, such as parts of the battle theme. This is probably only a minor complaint, but I did think that my disc was playing up when I first heard that section of the song. Aside from that, the game more or less only featured ambient sounds, and when music did play during some of the events, it really wasn't anything out of the ordinary. However, Kikuta's charm certainly is there. At the end of the day, Koudelka isn't a bad game, and it isn't a masterpiece. There were some internal arguments about the game's direction, with Kikuta wanting a more action-based battle system inspired by Resident Evil, and his employees wanting something similar to what Square was putting out. Despite all that, the grid-based tactical RPG element coupled with horror worked surprisingly well. It wasn't a complicated system, but it's not exactly a walk in the park. The game, despite being 4 discs, was very short, and I was able to complete the game in under 15 hours. The FMVs were what I presume took up a lot of the disc space, and I can see why. If you're really big on the Shadowheart games, you would have probably already played this, but if you haven't, pick it up and see where the whole story began. If you haven't played a Shadowhearts game, then I think it's a game worth spending a day or two completing. So with that, it's time for my rating. I would give Koudelka this pretty looking FMV out of 10. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next Infinite Backlog review.